I used to always ask, just as a sort of a rhetorical question, what's the difference between a stone, a pebble, a rock, and a boulder? And I think, there may be some kind of definition between one or the other, but the boundary line between any of them is not a very clearly delineated. There's only grey area between those definitions. Look, I suppose that feeds into the idea of the labels that we assign to concepts that become words, and very rarely with any words do we have the same mental image of anything, especially nouns in our head. But we have feelings when it comes to verbs and things like this as well, and we've sort of there's connotations even that we accept that there are generally different connotations with synonyms. So it's very difficult to, I remember learning about the mental map. So we have a mental map in our head, and then we turn it into a sound that goes into somebody else's ear,
right,
and we assume that recreates the same mental map. But what I did want to say about the stone and the boulder, etc., is consciousness. If something is alive, right? I know that we talk about artificial intelligence. There is no definition about what it means to be conscious. It's something about enough complexity in the cerebral cortex, right? So then it's assumed, maybe if we get enough complexity or just make it large enough interconnected networks of computers, that there'll be somehow an intelligence. And I'll use the word aggregate. That is what's used, by the way, in fiber networks. You aggregate all your fiber networks or your fiber cables into different switches and things like this. So somewhere in the machine does the Godhead reside. That's, by the way, what Robert M. Pirsig talked about in his book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. He said, yes, indeed, the Buddha can reside in the gears of a motorbike just as well as inside a computer and anything else as he would in the petals of a flower. I don't know. When I was a kid, I was absolutely sure, when I started learning programming, 100% sure that we certainly couldn't create an artificial consciousness if we don't even understand what our own is. How could some entity that doesn't understand its own consciousness create an artificial one? Nonsense. I'm not so sure anymore anyway. But if something is tiny, and as far as I remember, a virus is much, much smaller and less complex than a bacterium. So a bacterium goes to a parasite then, or it can be one itself, but make it a bit larger than it is. And I think we don't actually say it outright, but we think what we're saying is that a parasite is more than a bacterium, because it's not just a very simple cell thing that couldn't have a consciousness. It knows who it is, and it knows what it wants, and it has motivations that it wants to carry out. At what point does this happen? Right? So you start off with, let's say, an atom, and then you go up to a cell, and then you go up to a virus, and then you go up to a bacterium and up to a parasite that is like, shaped like something we've seen in one of these black goo type movies or videos. At what point does something become an entity that we can say, no, that's no longer a bacterium, that's a parasite, and it knows that it's a parasite, and it's going, tee, I'm going to climb in between these cell walls or whatever it might be, and I'm going to replicate myself. We talk about these concepts as if they are not only meaningful, but have clear boundaries between them. They don't. And Kerry Mullis himself, I think, said when you start looking into the PCR stuff and you start, going deeper and deeper into electron microscopes, it is a fractal landscape. There is no end to it. You say, now I'm down to 1 million or 1 nano magnification. Can I go? Yes, I can go further. I'm down to 10 to the power minus 12. And you keep going until maybe you come back around again, or who the hell knows. Reality, as the fella from Quantum of Conscience would say by now, has broken down a long time ago.